Hello, this is Jim Daniel from Revol LLC. And as part of our series on digital business transformation, I've had the privilege of helping produce Transform 2020 in association with the Mass Technology Leadership Council in Kramer Studios. This is highlights from episode 2 with 3 wonderful guests, Joe Fuller from Harvard Business School, Gene Hammond from the Learn Launch Accelerator, and Ray Offenheiser from Notre Dame. So let's hear what they had to say. So we began with a really interesting insight from Gene on the chasm that exists between universities and the businesses and employees who need to work.
If we look at this graphic, we can see that there's a very deep division between what people who are in higher ed think about what they're producing for the workforce and what employers think about in terms of, am I getting my needs met? And even the employees themselves understanding whether or not they can move forward in the workplace.
With this insight in mind, we then turned to Joe and asked, okay, so what is happening with the employers and the employees on the skills for the future? Joe is a professor at the Harvard Business School, and he's co-founder and CEO of Monitor, currently Deloitte Monitor, which 10 years ago entered the research into this whole area. And Joe, I'd like to get your perspective on all of this. I mean, Gene describes what's going on the corporate side. You know that space very well. What's happening at the seam between the corporation and their employees?
Well, I think employers have recognized two things. First of all, that the pace of technological change that they want to implement is such that it's unrealistic for them to rely on exclusively new hires or higher education institutions to provide what they need. Therefore, they're going to have to instill the skills that they need in their existing workforce.
So if we're going to have to build up a whole new set of skills, what skills are we building towards? Let's hear what Joe. What are these jobs of the future? I mean, James Tracy spoke at an earlier event when we had a Transform in person, and he talks about the creative, curated, and caring economy.
Yep.
Right? And the caring component is there. I mean, what are the jobs on the other side? I'd like to turn it to Joe and Ray. I mean, where do we all end up being Uber drivers, or do we all end up, learning how to do machine algorithms with linear regression? It doesn't seem possible. What are the jobs of the future? I know people are asking questions on the chat line about this.
As a born and raised Bostonian, I don't think I'd qualify as an Uber driver because I drive too fast and ignore too many yellow lights. I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is the jobs of the future actually will reflect the workforce that's available.
So the workforce that's available, what are we building for? Again, let's see what Ray has to say about a robot-proof future. What I like about Joe's comment about burning glass is that we tend to say we want to go get a job. And maybe the better way to look at it is we need to assemble a set of skills. And I like that term, power skills, which are the human-to-human skills, and digital skills, which are the human-to-devices skills. And somehow they have to be fused. I mean, Ray, I know you've talked about Dr. Joseph Aoun's work on building a robot-proof future. Is that something you guys are thinking about? Is that how? I mean, what happens to all of those both factory workers, which are being replaced by plain old robots, and high-level managers and high-level other skill sets who are interested in finding the work of the future?
Yeah, I think actually one of the great resources that Boston has in this area is Dr. Joseph Aoun, president of Northeastern University, who's actually written this book called The Robot Proof. But I think it's a book about the robot-proof university, and he's basically using, I suppose, in a sense, his own university as a model for where we should be going, and has actually been trying to move his university into this space.
All right, so we've got a whole bunch of new skills that we clearly need to go get and acquire in order to be relevant. But how does that work?
Gene, you've raised an interesting point there, and something that we strangely don't know a lot about is how people actually acquire a skill.
Yes.
We don't know how that learning process takes place. We don't know what causes a skill to be sufficiently deeply held so that it'll survive moving from one job that draws on that skills to another job, but in a different environment that also relies those skills or might rely on some new ones. So just like we need innovation in things like financing mechanisms and the technology of learning, we need innovation in our understanding of human cognition.
So a lot of big thoughts, and as we were coming up to the hour, let's put it all together.
What you guys have collectively just said is a couple of things. One is, it's not the jobs of the future, it's the skills of the future. How the skills are developed is not well understood, but we do know that there are new sets of skills. We're going to try to build bridges back to K-12 and to higher ed, but meanwhile, the innovation is going to happen with the corporations, is what I'm hearing, and therefore, that costs money and time, and so that money and time is going to come in some sort of a cooperative agreement between the employee and the employer. And as I understand these income sharing agreements, it's sort of like, if I invest in you, employee, and I pay for you to get this skill,
Yep.
then you got to pay some of it back somehow, either by staying on staff so you don't just get the skill and leave, or I can pay you more, but I get some of that back. And
Yep. This
is
has
that all?
always been the way.
Is that what's going on right now?
Yeah, that's what people are talking about.
So I got
It's
that
a new
right?
way of doing it.
All right, so what's the role of government, higher ed? How are we going to pull this all together with all the things going on, particularly in light of the pandemic?
Really, the simple answer is that we have to do both. We have to have all of those innovative outside of government approaches, and we have to get busy on not letting government get away with not doing the job that we ask it to do. And one of the big jobs we asked it to do was to work on the K-12 system. So let's do both, and then I think we really can make some differences here. And digital natives are empowered people that can be a part of the future. So we need to get more and more of them.
Hope you've enjoyed this 7-minute video. And if you want to watch the full episode, the link is right here. And if you'd like more information, feel free to reach out to me, Jim Daniel, at Revol, and we can answer any questions you have or provide more resources. Thanks for your time today. Be well.